Your next act, folks. This is a joy to bring this gentleman to the stage. This next act is the winner of the 2008 Limerick, Ireland Blarney contest. Please welcome Paddy O'Herlihy.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be amongst you. Good evening, my friends. What a treat. Aren't you a handsome crowd? Well, I'll tell you, each and every year, my hometown of Limerick, Ireland, holds a Blarney contest, and the top prize goes to the fellow who tells the tallest tales in town. And I have told some rather tall tales in my time, let me tell you. Would you like to hear one? Oh, I'm so glad. Well, a while ago, my sister-in-law came into town on the ferry and asked me to pick her up there. Well, the poor dear waited over an hour for me, finally called a cab, came to my house, pounded on the door, and said, "Paddy O'Herlihy, where were you?" And I says, "Well, let me tell you. I was on my way to the ferry when my car hit something, and I jumped out of the car, and there in the road was a wee little leprechaun. And he had broken his leg, and I says, "Well, leprechaun, I've got you now, and I'm for having your pot of gold, too." And he says, "Well, you haven't caught me yet." And I laughed, and I bent over, and I heard him whispering an incantation in the old language. And just then, a tree by the side of the road came to life and grabbed me with its branches and held me in the air, while the wee little leprechaun dragged himself off the road and into the forest and disappeared. Only then did the tree set me down, and I made my way to the ferry, but you had gone, dear, I told my sister-in-law. Now, of course, the truth of that story is that I had been up for a job at a packaging plant in Galway 3 weeks prior, and I didn't get the job, and it sent me on a bit of a bender. And on the morning that my sister-in-law came to the ferry, I had the DTs so bad that I could not button my trousers. I couldn't do it. So I just lay there on the floor, trembling and sweating and wishing to God that I could just die there. Is the truth of that one. Would you like to hear another one? Oh, I'm so glad. Well, a while back I turned up at the birthday party of Mary O'Shaughnessy, and everyone says, "Paddy, where's your wife Margaret?" And I says, "Well, let me tell you. Margaret baked a delicious lemon cake, and she set it out upon the windowsill to cool, and a troll came along and ate it. And he must have liked it, because then he jumped into the kitchen and he says, "Bake me another lemon cake." And Margaret whipped up some batter, and then she said to the troll, "Troll, if you really want a delicious experience, jump into the cake pan and swim around in the batter." Well, I knew right then and there that clever Margaret was going to bake that troll into the cake. And I knew it was going to take a while. So I says, "Let me head off to the party, and she'll be along as soon as that troll is good and cooked." Now, of course, the truth of that story is that earlier in the day, Margaret had made me a cup of tea too strong, as always. And so I threw it in her face. And then I took the rest of the kettle of boiling hot water and I poured it over her head. And so she had 2nd and 3rd degree burns on her scalp, and on her neck and her shoulders and her chest, and of course her face. And she was in no shape to attend a birthday party. No. Would you like to hear another one? Oh, I'm so glad. Well, a while back I turned up at the pub, and my knuckles were all bloody and raw and scraped up. And everybody says to me, "Paddy O'Herlihy, what happened to your knuckles?" And I says, "Well, let me tell you. I was walking down the lane, and a big gust of wind came along and put my hat up on top of someone's roof. And I didn't know how to get it out of there. And just then, along came a pixie. And I says, "Pixie, will you help me get me hat?" And she says, "Reach it yourself." And then she cast a spell. And sure enough, my arms became 10 times their normal length. And I had no trouble reaching up onto that roof, grabbing me hat and putting it back on my head. And when I turned around to have my arms turned back to normal size, the pixie was gone. So I had to walk all through town looking for that pixie, with my arms dragging behind me and my knuckles scraping on the road. But I did find her. Now, of course, the truth of that story is that there's a little girl on my block who keeps leaving her fucking tricycle in my driveway. I told her 100 times, I know that I've got the smoothest driveway on the block, but get your fucking tricycle out of my fucking driveway. And so this time I had enough, and I went over to her house and I punched her in the mouth. And her father comes out and he goes, Paddy, you can't punch a little girl. And I says, do you want some too? God fucking beat you in the road in front of your family and the whole block. And he kept shooting off his mouth, and I did. I punched him again and again in the mouth until he was choking on his own fucking teeth. And that's what really happened to me, Knuckles. Would you like to hear another one? Oh, I'm so glad! Well, last Christmas I turned up at a Christmas party and it was dinner with all the trimmings, but I was stuffed and couldn't eat a bite. The host said to me, how dare you show up at Christmas dinner all stuffed and you can't eat a bite? What's the story? And I says, let me tell you. This morning, bright and early, I skipped breakfast and I went out fishing with my good friend Seamus, and I was so hungry that I said, the next thing either one of us catches, I will eat it. And he says, no matter what it is, and I says, no matter what. And sure enough, he pulls out of the water a battleship that sunk off the coast of Ireland in World War I. Well, I'm a man of me word. It took me all day, but I did get it down. Now, of course, the truth of that story is that I rent an apartment to an old lady on Morton Street, and I stopped by on Christmas morning just to make sure she didn't blow January's rent buying presents for people. And what did I see lounging on her couch but a big plump cat? And I've got a strict no pets policy, which she knows. So I grabbed the cat, I took it into the kitchen, I killed it, I skinned it, I cleaned it, and I made it into a soup. And then I ate it in front of her. And I made her have some too. And let me tell you, it was the saddest Christmas lunch you've ever seen in your life. Oh, I'm eating my own cat! Well. But probably the story that I am most famous for is the one I told in court last year. When a certain prosecutor wanted to know what I was doing at the airport with someone else's blood all over my clothes and £10,000 in cash in a paper bag, and I says, well, jury, let me tell you. I was walking through the forest when I came upon a terrible fight between a fairy and a harpy. And I grabbed up my shillelagh and I struck the harpy, but she was too strong and she tossed me off, and then she sunk a big claw into the fairy. And the fairy was terribly wounded, but she wanted to thank me for trying to help her. So she gave me her magical necklace, knowing that without the necklace she would turn mortal and die of her wounds. But she told me as she gave me the necklace, take this, sell it for £10,000 and take yourself on a spur-of-the-moment vacation to some place that doesn't have an extradition treaty with Ireland. And then she died in my arms, bleeding human blood all over me. Now, of course, the truth of that story is that one night I was having drinks with an old schoolmate of mine, and we were talking about how the nuns used to beat us so much, and I says, let's go down to St. Catherine's and teach them a fucking lesson. How about that? And he says, yeah, let's do it. So we went down to that convent, and there we find Sister Mary Eileen sound asleep, and I pulled out my knife and I stabbed her once for every time that she beat me in front of the class. And then my friend says to me, oh my God, Paddy, what are you doing? You can't stab an honor. And I says, fuck you, Brian, and I stabbed him too. And then I heard all these priests and nuns coming down the hall. What's going on? And it was a terrible, terrible scene. I had to stab my way out. I think I killed 3 of them. And I hid out that night in the woods. And then the next morning I went to the bank and took out £10,000, and I tried to get out the next morning, but it didn't work, did it? In fact, the only reason I'm here now is because of a tall tale I told about being a prison guard on his way home from the evening, when in fact it was just me wearing the uniform of a prison guard who was dead in a washing machine. Well, I truly have kissed the Blarney stone, haven't I? They're going to love me in Venezuela, I think. Well, good night, everyone. It was lovely to be with you.
Patty O'Hurley, everybody. Big ever, Patty.